The bar's amber glow flickered across Ethan's face as he stared at the engagement ring on his finger. Its gleam now a cruel mockery of the life he'd planned. 3 hours ago, he'd found the text messages raw, explicit, undeniable between Caleb, his fiancé, and Marcus, the star quarterback of Caleb's college football team. His chest burned, not just with betrayal, but with the audacity of Caleb's lies, spun so effortlessly for months. Ethan had always been the quiet one, the planner, the dreamer who built their future in his mind, a small house in Chicago's suburbs, a dog, maybe kids someday. Caleb, with his easy charm and linebacker's build, had been the spark that made Ethan believe in forever. They'd met at a university mixer. Ethan, a literature major with a knack for poetry. Caleb, a kinesiology student with a smile that could melt steel. 2 years of late-night talks, shared coffee mugs, and promises sealed with that ring now tainted by Marcus's name lighting up Caleb's phone. The bar was nearly empty, save for a lone bartender wiping glasses and a couple whispering in a corner. Ethan's hands trembled as he sipped his whiskey, the burn doing little to dull the ache. He'd confronted Caleb that morning, voice steady despite the storm inside. "How long?" Ethan had asked, standing in their shared apartment, the air thick with silence. Caleb's face had crumpled, but his confession was worse. 6 months. Stolen moments in locker rooms, hotel rooms, even their own bed when Ethan was at work. Marcus, the alpha teammate, all charisma and conquest, had been Caleb's thrill, his escape from the ordinary life Ethan offered. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Caleb, "Can we talk? I'm sorry. I love you." He laughed bitterly, the sound swallowed by the bar's soft jazz. Love. What a hollow word. He'd spent years loving Caleb, building him up, cheering at his games, only to be gutted by the one person he trusted most. But Ethan wasn't the type to crumble quietly. Not anymore. He opened his laptop, the screen casting a cold glow on his face. Caleb's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a story, one Ethan could tell better than anyone. As a freelance journalist, he'd always chased truth. But this time, it was personal. His fingers hovered over the keys, then began to type. A blog post, raw and unfiltered, titled "The Alpha's Game: How My Fiancé Betrayed Me with His Teammate." He poured it all out, the late-night texts, the lies, the way Caleb had looked at him with fake devotion while carrying on with Marcus. Ethan named names, sparing no detail, his words sharp as knives. By midnight, the post was live on a popular sports blog, one Ethan had contributed to before. He leaned back, heart pounding, knowing this would ripple through Caleb's world, the team, the fans, the university. Public shame was a brutal weapon, but Ethan wielded it with precision. He wasn't just exposing Caleb. He was reclaiming his own voice. The next morning, Ethan woke to a flood of notifications. His post had gone viral, shared across social media, picked up by local news. Comments poured in, support for Ethan, outrage at Caleb, demands for Marcus to be benched. Ethan's phone rang his best friend, Mia, her voice a mix of awe and worry. "You okay? F. This is huge." Ethan exhaled, staring out his apartment window at the Chicago skyline. "I'm not okay. he said. But I'm free. Caleb's calls came next, one after another. Voicemails pleading for forgiveness. Ethan deleted them without listening. He packed a bag, left the ring on the kitchen counter, and walked out. The apartment, once a haven of their shared dreams, now felt like a graveyard. He didn't know where he was going, maybe Mia's place. Maybe a hotel, but he knew one thing. He was done being Caleb's shadow. At a coffee shop later that day, Ethan scrolled through the fallout. The university's athletic department issued a statement, promising an investigation into team conduct. Marcus's Instagram was private now, flooded with hate comments. Caleb's teammates were distancing themselves. Their group chat leaked by an anonymous source showing them calling Caleb out for screwing over a good guy. Ethan felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was fleeting. Revenge didn't heal the hole in his chest. He sipped his coffee, watching people pass by outside. A young man caught his eye, tall, with kind eyes and a sketchbook under his arm. Their gazes met briefly, and the stranger offered a small smile before disappearing into the crowd. Ethan's heart stirred, not with longing, but with possibility. He wasn't ready for love. Not yet. But he was ready to live for himself. That night, Ethan checked into a hotel, his laptop open again. He started a new post, this one quieter, introspective, walking away, a story of reclaiming myself. He wrote about pain, about betrayal, but also about resilience. He wrote about the Ethan who loved fiercely, who trusted too much, and who was now learning to stand alone. The words flowed, not with anger, but with hope. As he hit publish, Ethan felt lighter. Caleb's betrayal had shattered him, but it hadn't broken him. He was still here, still writing, still breathing. And for the first time in months, he felt like he could see a future one where he wasn't defined by someone else's choices. Ethan's hotel room was small, the kind with thin walls and a view of a brick alley. But it felt like a sanctuary. He sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop balanced on his knees, scrolling through the comments on his second post. Most were supportive, strangers sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery. But a few stung accusations of airing dirty laundry, of being petty. Ethan closed the laptop, rubbing his temples. Was he petty? Maybe. But he'd spent too long swallowing his pain to care. His phone buzzed again. Mia? Meet me at the pier. Her text read. You need air. Ethan hesitated, then grabbed his jacket. Navy Pier was a short walk, the Chicago wind sharp against his face as he navigated the bustling crowds. Mia was waiting by the Ferris wheel, her curly hair wild in the breeze, her eyes scanning him with concern. You look like hell, she said, pulling him into a hug. I feel like it, Ethan admitted, leaning against the railing. The lake stretched out, endless and gray, mirroring the churn in his chest. Mia didn't push, just stood beside him, her presence a quiet anchor. You did the right thing, she said finally. Caleb doesn't get to walk away clean after what he did. Ethan nodded, but the victory felt hollow. The blog post had done its job. Caleb's reputation was in tatters. Marcus was benched pending the investigation, and the team's morale was crumbling. But Ethan's heart still ached. He'd loved Caleb with everything he had, and now he was left picking up the pieces of a life he no longer recognized. Mia nudged him. Let's ride the wheel. Clear your head. They climbed into a gondola, the city unfolding below as they rose. From up here, Chicago looked untouchable, its lights defiant against the dusk. Ethan exhaled, letting the height and the quiet loosen something inside him. I don't know who I am without him, he said softly. Mia squeezed his hand. You're Ethan. The guy who writes poetry that makes people cry. The guy who stayed up all night helping me study for finals. You're enough. With or without him. Her words landed like a lifeline. And for the first time in days, Ethan smiled. Back on the ground, they grabbed hot dogs from a vendor and sat on a bench, watching tourists snap photos. Ethan's phone lit up with a new email not from Caleb, but from a local LGBTQ+ support group. They'd seen his post, they said, and wanted to invite him to speak at their next meeting. Your story resonates. The email read. You're not alone. Ethan stared at the words, his throat tight. He hadn't written the post for anyone but himself. But maybe, just maybe, it was reaching others too. The next day, Ethan met with the group's organizer, a woman named Rosa with warm eyes and a no-nonsense vibe. Your post hit home for a lot of us, she said over coffee at a cozy cafe in Boys Town. Betrayal's universal, but it's heavier when you're queer. People expect us to just take it, to stay quiet. Ethan nodded, stirring his latte. He'd felt that pressure his whole libido be the good gay guy, to not make waves. Writing the post had been his rebellion. Rosa leaned forward. Speak at our meeting. Tell your story. Not the blog version, the real one. The messy one. Ethan hesitated. Exposing Caleb online was one thing. Standing in front of strangers, bearing his soul, was another. But Rosa's gaze was steady, and he found himself nodding. Okay. I'll do it. The meeting was held in a community center, a modest room with folding chairs and a coffee urn. Ethan arrived early, his stomach in knots, clutching a notebook where he'd scribbled his thoughts. About 20 people showed up, a mix of ages and backgrounds, all part of the queer community. Rosa introduced him, and Ethan stepped to the front, his voice shaky at first. He didn't talk about the blog or the viral fallout. Instead, he spoke about loving Caleb, about the quiet moments cooking together, laughing over bad movies that had made the betrayal cut so deep. As he spoke, he saw nods, tears, hands reaching for other hands. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. A young man, maybe 19, approached him afterward, his voice barely above a whisper. My boyfriend cheated too. I thought it was my fault. Your story. It helped. Ethan's eyes burned, but he managed to smile. It's not your fault, he said. It's never your fault. That night, Ethan walked back to his hotel, the city alive around him. He felt different, not healed, but stronger. His story wasn't just his anymore. It was a thread in a larger tapestry, connecting him to others who'd been hurt, who'd survived. He pulled out his phone and started drafting another post. This one about the meeting, about finding community in the wreckage. He didn't mention Caleb or Marcus. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about Ethan and the man he was becoming. Weeks passed, and Ethan settled into a new rhythm. He moved into a small studio apartment in Lakeview. The walls bare, but the space his own. The viral post had brought opportunities, freelance gigs, interview requests, even a podcast invite, but it also brought scrutiny. Some called him brave, others vengeful. A sports columnist labeled him the scorned lover with an axe to grind. Ethan read the article, then closed his laptop. Let them think what they wanted. He was done apologizing for his truth. His days were filled with writing, coffee runs, and long walks along Lake Michigan. The lake's vastness calmed him, its waves a reminder that life moved on, even when it felt impossible. He started journaling again, something he hadn't done since college. The pages filled with poems, raw, jagged things about love and loss, but also about hope. One night, he read a poem at an open mic in a dimly lit bookstore. The crowd was small, but their applause was warm, and Ethan felt a spark of the old fire that used to drive him. Caleb's calls had stopped, but Ethan heard whispers of his fallout. The team had sidelined him. Not officially, but enough to cost him his starting position. Marcus, too, was under fire, his sponsorships dropping like flies. Ethan tried not to care, but a part of him, a small, petty part, felt a grim satisfaction. He didn't linger on it. Revenge was a cold comfort, and he was tired of being cold. One afternoon, while working at a cafe, Ethan noticed the man with the sketchbook again. He was at a corner table, pencil moving swiftly over paper, his brow furrowed in concentration. Ethan watched him for a moment, struck by the quiet intensity in his movements. The man looked up, catching Ethan's gaze, and smiled a shy, genuine smile that made Ethan's heart skip. He looked away, flustered, and buried himself in his work. Later, as Ethan packed up to leave, the man approached. "I'm Lucas," he said, extending a hand. His voice was soft, with a faint southern drawl. "I've seen you here a few times." Ethan shook his hand, noting the warmth of his grip. "Ethan," he said, "I'm new around here." Lucas's eyes crinkled. "New's good. Means you get to start fresh." They talked for a while. About art, books, the city. Lucas was a graphic designer, 26, with a quiet humor that disarmed Ethan. He didn't push, didn't pry. But when Ethan mentioned his writing, Lucas's eyes lit up. "I read your post," he admitted. "The one about, you know." It was brave. Ethan tensed, waiting for judgment. But Lucas just smiled. "It made me think about truth. How hard it is to tell sometimes." Ethan didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Lucas scribbled his number on a napkin and slid it across the table. "If you ever want to grab coffee." "Not here, though. Somewhere with better pastries." Ethan laughed, pocketing the napkin. It wasn't a date. Not yet. But it was a step. A small, terrifying, hopeful step. That night, Ethan spoke at another community meeting. This one larger, with a panel on queer relationships. He shared more of his story, focusing on the aftermath, how he was learning to trust himself again. The audience asked questions, some gentle, some sharp. One woman asked, "Do you regret going public?" Ethan paused, then shook his head. I regret trusting him, but not telling my truth. Afterward, Rosa pulled him aside. You're good at this, she said. You connect with people. Ever think about doing it full time? Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Like advocacy. Rosa nodded. Or writing. Speaking. Whatever feels right. You've got a voice, Ethan. Use it. The idea stuck with him. He'd always seen his writing as a side gig, a way to pay bills while chasing bigger dreams. But maybe this was the dream, using his words to help others, to build something real. He spent the next few days researching, reaching out to organizations, pitching a column about queer experiences. A local magazine bit, offering him a weekly slot. It wasn't much money, but it was a start. Ethan met Lucas for coffee a week later, at a quirky shop with mismatched chairs and killer croissants. Lucas brought his sketchbook, showing Ethan his drawings, vivid cityscapes, portraits with soulful eyes. One sketch caught Ethan's attention, a man sitting by a window, lost in thought, his face half-shadowed. That's you, Lucas said, almost shyly. From the cafe the other day. Ethan's cheeks warmed. You make me look better than I feel. Lucas grinned. I just draw what I see. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on dreams, fears, the little things that made them who they were. Lucas had grown up in Georgia, left home at 18 to escape a family who didn't accept him. Art saved me, he said, tracing the rim of his coffee cup. It's how I make sense of the world. Ethan understood. Writing was his lifeline, his way of stitching himself back together. As they parted, Lucas's hand brushed Ethan's, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him. See you around, Lucas asked. Ethan nodded, his smile real for the first time in weeks. Yeah, I'd like that. Ethan's new column, Queer Voices, launched to a modest but engaged audience. Each week, he wrote about love, identity, and resilience, drawing from his own life and the stories he heard at community meetings. Readers emailed him, sharing how his words helped them navigate their own struggles. It wasn't fame, but it was purpose, and that was enough. His friendship with Lucas grew, built on quiet moments, coffee dates, walks through Millennium Park, late-night texts about nothing and everything. Lucas was different from Caleb, less flashy, more grounded. He listened when Ethan talked, really listened, and didn't shy away from the messy parts of Ethan's past. But Ethan held back, wary of his own heart. Trust was a fragile thing, and he wasn't ready to hand it over. One evening, Lucas invited Ethan to an art gallery opening where one of his pieces was on display. The gallery was small, tucked in a trendy part of Wicker Park, filled with people sipping wine and murmuring about brushstrokes. Lucas's Paisea, vibrant painting of a man standing against a stormy sky, drew Ethan in. It's about survival, Lucas explained, standing beside him. About standing tall, even when the world's falling apart. Ethan looked at him, the gallery lights catching the green flecks in Lucas's eyes. You're kind of amazing. You know that. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Lucas blushed, ducking his head. Takes one to know one. They left the gallery together, walking through the chilly night. Lucas stopped at a street corner. Turning to Ethan. "Can I ask you something?" His voice was soft, hesitant. Ethan nodded, his pulse quickening. "Are you open to something new? With someone new?" Ethan froze, the question hitting like a wave. He wanted to say yes, wanted to lean into the warmth of Lucas's presence. But fear held him back. "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to be. But it's hard." Lucas nodded, no judgment in his eyes. "I get it. No rush. I'm here. Okay." Ethan smiled, relief washing over him. Lucas wasn't pushing, wasn't demanding. He was just there. And that felt like enough for now. The next week, Ethan got an unexpected call from Caleb's sister, Sarah. They'd always been close, bonded by their shared love for Caleb. But he hadn't heard from her since the breakup. "Can we meet?" she asked, her voice strained. Ethan agreed, though dread pooled in his stomach. They met at a diner, the kind with sticky tables and endless coffee refills. Sarah looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed. "He's a mess," she said, stirring her coffee. "Caleb. He knows he screwed up. He wants to see you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He doesn't get to want that." Sarah nodded, tears spilling over. "I know. I had to try. For him." Ethan softened, seeing her pain. "I'm sorry you're caught in this," he said. "But I can't go back. Not after everything." Sarah reached for his hand. "You're stronger than he ever deserved." The conversation lingered with Ethan, stirring up old wounds. He wrote about it in his column, exploring the collateral damage of betrayal, how it hurt not just him, but the people around them. The piece struck a chord, shared widely across social media. Ethan's name was becoming known, not just as the guy who exposed his cheating fiancé, but as a voice for those navigating love's aftermath. He met Lucas again, this time at a quiet park near Ethan's apartment. They sat on a bench, watching kids play on a swing set. Lucas had brought his sketchbook, and Ethan peeked at a drawing, a rough sketch of the two of them, sitting just like this, their shoulders almost touching. "You're sneaky," Ethan teased, but his heart swelled. Lucas grinned. "You're inspiring." They talked about their pasts, their fears. Ethan shared more about Caleb, about the shame of feeling not enough. Lucas listened, then said, "You're more than enough. You're you. That's the best part." Ethan's eyes stung, and he looked away, blinking hard. Lucas didn't push, just sat there, his presence steady. As they walked back, Lucas slipped his hand into Ethan's, a tentative gesture. Ethan didn't pull away. The touch was small, but it felt like a promise of something real, something worth waiting for. Ethan's column gained traction, and with it came invitations to speak at larger events. He accepted one for a regional LGBTQ+ conference. Nervous but determined. The night before, he sat in his apartment, drafting his speech. He wanted to talk about healing, about finding strength in vulnerability. But the words felt heavy. He texted Lucas, half joking, "Help. I'm drowning in my own metaphors. Lucas replied with a sketch of Ethan at a podium. A tiny superhero cape added for effect. You've got this. The caption read. The conference was held in a downtown hotel. The ballroom packed with activists, allies, and curious newcomers. Ethan's speech was raw, weaving his story with broader themes of trust and self-worth. He spoke about Caleb, not with anger, but with clarity how the betrayal had forced him to rebuild himself. The audience leaned in, some nodding, others wiping tears. When he finished, the applause was thunderous, and Ethan felt a rush of something new, pride. Afterward, people approached him, sharing their own stories. A trans woman told him how his column helped her leave a toxic relationship. A teenager said Ethan's words gave them courage to come out. Ethan listened, overwhelmed but grateful. This was bigger than him now. Lucas was waiting outside the hotel, leaning against a lamppost, sketchbook in hand. You were incredible, he said, his smile bright. Ethan laughed, still buzzing from the speech. I was terrified. Lucas stepped closer, his voice soft. Didn't look it. You looked unstoppable. They grabbed dinner at a nearby taco joint. The conversation easy but charged with something unspoken. Lucas talked about his latest project, a mural for a community center, and Ethan shared ideas for his next column. Under the table, their knees brushed, and neither pulled away. It was small, but it was progress. The next day, Ethan got an email from a literary agent. She'd read his columns, seen his speech online, and wanted to talk about a book deal. A memoir, maybe, or a collection of essays about love and identity. Ethan stared at the email, his heart racing. This was a chance to turn his pain into something lasting. He called Mia, who screamed so loudly he had to hold the phone away from his ear. You're a star. F. She said. Own it. He met with the agent, a sharp woman named Claire who saw potential in Ethan's voice. You're not just telling your story, she said. You're telling ours. They brainstormed ideas, and Ethan left the meeting feeling like the world was opening up. He texted Lucas the news, and Lucas replied with a string of confetti emojis and a promise to celebrate. That weekend, Lucas took Ethan to a rooftop bar with a view of the city. The air was crisp, the skyline glittering below. They clinked glasses, toasting to new beginnings. Lucas's hand rested on Ethan's arm, and this time, Ethan leaned into it. I'm glad I met you, Ethan said, the words heavy with meaning. Lucas's eyes softened. Me too. But the past wasn't done with Ethan. Late that night, he got a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. It's Marcus. Ethan's stomach dropped. He hadn't heard from Marcus since the scandal broke. Hadn't wanted to. He deleted the text. But it lingered, a shadow he couldn't shake. The next morning, Marcus was waiting outside Ethan's apartment, leaning against a car, his face haggard. I'm not here to fight, he said, hands raised. I just want to apologize. Ethan crossed his arms, his jaw tight. You don't get to do that. Not after what you did. Marcus nodded, his eyes downcast. I know. I messed up. Caleb and I. It wasn't about you. It was about us being stupid. Ethan laughed, sharp and cold. You think that makes it better? Marcus shook his head. No. I'm sorry. For what it's worth. He walked away, and Ethan stood there, his anger fading into something else. Closure. Maybe. Marcus's apology didn't fix anything, but it closed a door Ethan hadn't realized was still open. He called Lucas, needing to hear his voice. Can you come over? He asked. Lucas was there in 20 minutes. No questions asked. They sat on Ethan's couch, and Ethan told him about Marcus, about the weight of the past. Lucas listened, then pulled Ethan into a hug. You're stronger than all of this, he said, and I'm not going anywhere. Ethan threw himself into the book proposal, working late nights, his apartment littered with coffee cups and post-it notes. Claire pushed him to dig deeper, to explore not just the betrayal, but what came after the rebuilding, the rediscovery. It was grueling, peeling back layers of himself, but it felt right. He was telling a story that mattered, not just for him, but for anyone who'd ever felt broken by love. Lucas became a constant in his life, their friendship teetering on the edge of something more. They spent evenings cooking together, Lucas teaching Ethan how to make his grandmother's gumbo, Ethan burning the rice but laughing through it. One night, as they washed dishes side by side, Lucas bumped Ethan's shoulder. You're getting better at this, he teased. Ethan flicked soap suds at him, and Lucas retaliated, the kitchen dissolving into laughter. But Ethan still hesitated. Every time he felt himself falling for Lucas, Caleb's betrayal flashed in his mind, a warning not to trust too soon. Lucas sensed it, never pushing, but his patience only made Ethan want him more. One evening, at Lucas's apartment, they watched a cheesy rom-com, their legs tangled under a blanket. When the credits rolled, Lucas turned to Ethan, his expression serious. I like you, Ethan. A lot. But I'll wait as long as you need. Ethan's heart pounded. He wanted to say it back, wanted to close the distance between them, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he leaned forward and kissed Lucas, soft and tentative. Lucas kissed him back, gentle but sure, and for a moment, the world was just them. No past, no pain, just possibility. The kiss didn't erase Ethan's fears, but it shifted something. He started opening up, sharing more of himself with Lucas. They talked about their dreams. Lucas wanted to open an art studio. Ethan wanted his book to make a difference. They supported each other, Lucas attending Ethan's readings, Ethan cheering at Lucas's mural unveiling. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Meanwhile, the fallout from Ethan's post continued. The university's investigation concluded, with Caleb and Marcus receiving suspensions from the team. The news made headlines, and Ethan's name resurfaced in articles, some praising his courage, others questioning his motives. He tried to tune it out, focusing on his work, but the noise was relentless. One day, while walking to a meeting with Claire, Ethan saw Caleb across the street. He looked different, thinner, his shoulders slumped. No trace of the confident athlete Ethan once knew. Their eyes met, and Caleb started to cross toward him. But Ethan turned away, his heart racing. He didn't know Caleb anything, not his time. not his forgiveness. That night, Ethan wrote a new column, titled The Cost of Truth. He explored the aftermath of his post, the way it had changed him, the way it had changed others. He wrote about Lucas, not by name, but as a light in the darkness, a reminder that love could be kind. The column went viral, and Ethan's inbox filled with messages from readers, some thanking him, others sharing their own journeys. Lucas read the column and showed up at Ethan's door with takeout and a grin. "You're making waves," he said, setting the food on the table. Ethan shrugged, but his smile betrayed him. "Just trying to make sense of it all." They ate together, the conversation light but meaningful. And when Lucas reached for Ethan's hand, Ethan didn't pull away. The book proposal was accepted, and Ethan signed a contract with a small but respected publisher. The advance wasn't huge, but it was enough to keep him afloat while he wrote. He dove into the work, pouring his heart into every chapter. Lucas was there through it all, reading drafts, offering feedback, making Ethan laugh when the weight of the project felt too heavy. One night, as they lay on Lucas's couch, Ethan's head resting on his chest, Ethan said, "I think I'm ready." Lucas tilted his head. "For what?" Ethan looked up, his eyes steady. "For us. For this." Lucas's smile was brighter than the city lights outside, and when he kissed Ethan, it felt like a beginning. Ethan's book, tentatively titled Out of the Ashes, took shape over months of late nights and early mornings. He wrote about Caleb, about the betrayal that had shattered him, but also about the community that had lifted him up, Rosa, Mia, the strangers who'd shared their stories. And he wrote about Lucas, the quiet artist who'd shown him that love could be safe, could be kind. The words were hard-won, each chapter a piece of himself laid bare. Lucas was his rock, there for the highs and lows. When Ethan got stuck, Lucas would drag him out for ice cream or a walk, reminding him to breathe. When Ethan doubted himself, Lucas read his drafts and said, "This is going to change lives." Ethan believed him, not because he thought he was special, but because Lucas's faith in him was unshakable. Their relationship deepened, built on small moment-shared glances, late-night talks, the way Lucas's hand fit perfectly in Ethan's. They weren't rushing, but they were steady, each step forward deliberate. Ethan still had moments of doubt, flashes of Caleb's betrayal that made him flinch, but Lucas's presence grounded him. "I'm not him," Lucas said once, when Ethan pulled back after a fight. "I'm not going anywhere." And he didn't. The book's first draft was finished in spring, and Ethan sent it to Claire, his hands shaking as he hit send. Her feedback was glowing, but for more depth here, more clarity there. Ethan dove back in, revising, polishing, pouring himself into the work. The process was exhausting but exhilarating, like running a marathon he'd trained for his whole life. Meanwhile, his column continued to grow, its readership expanding beyond Chicago. He started getting recognized in public, strangers thanking him at coffee shops, asking for selfies at events. It was surreal, but Ethan stayed grounded, thanks to Lucas and Mia. "Don't let it go to your head," Mia teased, tossing a fry at him during one of their diner meetups. "You're still the guy who cries at dog videos." One day, Ethan got an unexpected invitation. A national LGBTQ+ conference wanted him to keynote. It was a big deal, thousands of attendees. Major media coverage. Ethan hesitated, the weight of it daunting. But Lucas pushed him. "You've got a story to tell," he said, "and people need to hear it." The conference was in San Francisco, and Lucas came along, sketching the city while Ethan prepared. The night of the keynote, Ethan stood backstage, his heart pounding, the crowd's murmur like a tidal wave. Lucas squeezed his hand before he stepped on stage. "You're enough," he whispered. Ethan carried those words with him as he spoke. The speech was a blend of his story and a call to action about owning your pain, about building community, about fighting for love that respects you. The audience was rapt, their applause echoing long after he finished. Afterward, Ethan was mobbed by attendees, their stories pouring out like a dam breaking. He listened, hugged, cried with them. It was overwhelming, but it was everything. Back at the hotel, Lucas pulled Ethan into his arms. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick. Ethan buried his face in Lucas's shoulder, the weight of the day melting away. "I couldn't have done it without you," he murmured. Lucas kissed his forehead. "Yes, you could. But I'm glad I'm here." When they returned to Chicago, Ethan got news that his book had been picked up for a second printing before it even hit shelves. Pre-orders were strong, and Claire was already talking about a tour. Ethan felt like he was living someone else's life, but Lucas kept him grounded, reminding him to eat, to sleep, to laugh. One night, as they walked along the lakefront, Lucas stopped, pulling Ethan close. "I love you," he said, the words simple but heavy. Ethan froze, his heart racing. He'd heard those words before, from Caleb, and they'd burned him. But Lucas's eyes were steady, his hands warm, and Ethan knew this was different. "I love you too," he said, and the words felt like freedom. The book launch was a whirlwind. The bookstore was packed, standing room only, with Mia, Rosa, and Lucas in the front row. Ethan read from Out of the Ashes, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. He shared a chapter about forgiveness, not for Caleb, but for himself, for believing he wasn't enough. The crowd hung on every word, and when he finished, the applause felt like a hug from the universe. Afterward, he signed copies, chatting with readers who shared their own stories. One man, older, with graying hair, told Ethan, "Your book made me feel seen. I came out late, lost a lot. Thank you." Ethan's eyes stung as he shook the man's hand. This was why he'd written it, not for fame, but for connection. Lucas stayed by his side, helping with the crowd, his quiet presence a balm. When the night wound down, they slipped out to a nearby bar, just the two of them. Lucas raised a glass. "To you, Ethan. To everything you're becoming." Ethan clinked his glass, his heart full. "To us," he said. The book tour took Ethan across the country, from Seattle to New York, each stop a blur of readings, interviews, and new faces. Lucas joined him when he could, sketching in hotel rooms, sending Ethan silly drawings to ease his nerves. The tour was exhausting, but every email from a reader, every tearful hug at a signing, made it worth it. Back in Chicago, Ethan settled into a new normal. He and Lucas moved in together. A cozy apartment with a view of the lake. They decorated it with Lucas's art and Ethan's books. A space that felt like theirs. Ethan kept writing. His column now syndicated. His voice reaching further than he'd ever imagined. One day, while sorting through mail, Ethan found a letter from Caleb. No return address. Just a plain envelope with his name. He hesitated, then opened it. Caleb's handwriting was shaky. The words raw. I'm sorry. I'll always be sorry. I hope you're happy. Ethan read it once, then set it aside. He didn't hate Caleb anymore. He didn't feel much for him at all. That, he realized, was freedom. He showed the letter to Lucas, who read it silently, then set it down. You okay? He asked. Ethan nodded. Yeah. I am. Lucas pulled him close, and they stood there, the city humming outside, their future unfolding within. Years later, Ethan would look back on that time of betrayal. The blog post. The Faludas, the crucible that forged him. He'd built a life he loved. With Lucas. With his writing. With a community that held him up. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had shaped him. Made him stronger. Kinder. Braver. On a quiet evening, as they sat on their balcony, Lucas sketching and Ethan writing. Ethan looked over and smiled. Thank you, he said. Lucas raised an eyebrow. For what? Ethan leaned over, kissing him softly. For being you. For being here. Lucas grinned, pulling Ethan closer. Always. And as the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Ethan knew he'd found his ending, not the one he'd planned, but the one he'd fought for, the one he deserved.